Your teammates are not as bad as you think. I know, crazy, right? Some of you are probably intrigued, but the majority of you are already forming angry mobs in the comments. It seems hard to believe at times that losing games isn't out of your control and that the game isn't working against you. But hear me out. For those of you who weren't born yesterday, the concept of how humans perceive luck should be nothing new. We use biases and our limited perspectives to draw a picture of the world around us. But let's be smarter than that today. Let's use statistics, probability, and psychology to understand this concept a little bit deeper. Alright, so first we need to talk statistics. We can predict a lot about how our ranked games should go based on standard deviations. A standard deviation is the measure of the amount of variation data has from the mean. To help visualize, here's a look at a distribution curve, or better known as a bell curve. And yes, you guessed it, it's in the shape of a bell. Each section represents a deviation. For example, this section here would be 3 standard deviations away from the average. We know we can apply this to Rocket League with a quick study I conducted. Over a 10-game 2v2 ranked session, I recorded the average MMR difference between me and the other 3 players in the lobby. We could find the mean and plot out our distribution. The average difference in MMR from my own was -11, meaning I was playing in lobbies typically a bit lower than my rank, but nothing too notable. It was pretty close. From there, we could see that one standard deviation is about 24 points, meaning you can usually expect that 2/3 of the players in our lobby will be at or around the same rank as you. Well, what the f does any of that mean anyways? I mean, why did I even do any of that? Well, basically, it was a scientific way to show that your ranked games are surprisingly normal, and generally your teammates are at or around your rank most of the time. I know some of you might be thinking though, rank is not the best indicator of skill, and you're right. Just because someone's the same rank as you doesn't mean they're just as good. Or does it? I conducted another quick study, but this time I took to the masses. A poll on my Twitter revealed a lopsided yet predictable discovery. Sure enough, most people believe they are unlucky when it comes to teammates. A sizable 63% of players believe themselves unlucky, with about 20% of them classifying themselves as extremely unlucky. This is about 4 times the amount of people who voted for extremely lucky, coming in at only 5%. This obviously can't be right if we work off the principle that for every unlucky person, there has to also be a lucky person. We should be seeing about 50-50. Our study also showed that ranked, even in small sample sizes, is pretty unremarkable statistically speaking, but clearly this isn't the case. So what gives? I think we need to dive a little bit deeper. Let's take a look at some situations you'd run across in ranked and apply probability to them. When joining a 2v2 lobby, obviously there are 3 other people that will load in. You can rank each one of these 3 players in terms of skill. Let's say person A is the most skilled, with person B less skilled than A, and person C less skilled than B. There are probably going to be situations where you could call certain people's skill levels directly even, but the reality is one of these players is going to play the best of the 3 for the next 5 minutes. If you think about it, the odds that you get the best player is 1/3. That's only 33% of the time you end up with your favorable choice. Standard 3v3 is a little bit better odds with a 2 out of 5 chance that you end up with the best player option, but that's still only 40%. This might seem unfair, and it kind of is. With the odds against you, the responsibility is going to fall on you to be the best player in the lobby. If you aren't outperforming the other players, how are you ever going to rank up if you're at a disadvantage about 2/3 of the time? You're only at this disadvantage if you aren't playing better than the next best player in the lobby. Or if you really don't want a disadvantage at all, you can go play ones, but make sure you have a couple extra controllers.
I'm fucking dead, dude. I'm fucking dead.
Let's also chat about when Rocket League just kind of seems to be working against you. How many times have you said, what are the odds I get the same bad teammate a 3rd time in a row? Well, the odds might be unlikely, but unlikely things are actually likely to eventually happen if you take a big enough sample size. Let me explain. First off, we know it's very common to have repeat players for multiple games in a row. We know that from our earlier study, most players are within 30 MMR of your rank. making it highly likely to see them again in the next game. But what are the odds that you get them on your team every time? I mean, it is unlikely, don't get me wrong. If you give them a 1/3 chance of being on your team each lobby, 3 games in a row, you end up with a 1 in 27 chance. As a side note, these odds will actually be a little bit more likely if you're playing against duo queues, because there's only going to be 1 slot in your lobby that's open, and that's going to be the one on your team. But let's just be conservative because of this factor and say 1 in 20 chance. How many ranked games do you play in a session? A week? A month? Lots of people play hundreds, if not thousands of ranked matches. All of a sudden, a 1 in 20 chance, it doesn't seem so unlikely after all, considering the amount of games we play. We just expect unlikely things to never happen. Reality is, unlikely or unlucky things happen often and frequently. The game is kind of designed to challenge you. Last but not least, we need to talk about how you, yourself, your brain perceives things. As I mentioned earlier, our minds skew the world around us to manipulate it to our own benefit. One of my favorite ways to explain this is with illusory correlations. An illusory correlation is the phenomenon of perceiving a relationship between variables even when no such relationship exists. We often make false associations when novel or rare occurrences are more noticeable or emotional. So they tend to capture our attention more than the common ones. So how does this relate to ranked? Well, our teammates' mistakes are often extremely obvious and infuriating. On the contrary, if your teammate makes a good clear or a smart decision in the corner, it's something we more expect and don't take note of. This process allows us to fool ourselves on the outcomes and frequencies of the errors that the other players on the pitch are making. We can see how this works with a simple table. When you score a goal, we take note of this and gives ourselves a little +1 in our heads. But if your fault leads to conceding a goal, we're quick to forget. This is usually because we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We often blame the conceded goal on external factors. If we do take responsibility, it's usually a reasonable mistake that other people would have made in that situation. If your teammate scores a goal, it carries much less weight in our heads than when we ourselves score. But if your teammate's mistakes lead to a goal, this is an unacceptable error that provokes disappointment and anger, leading us to add a demerit to our teammate's resume. All this leads us into confirmation bias. We love to look for and find evidence that supports our preconceived notions and beliefs. And usually, these beliefs are thinking that all teammates are bad and that you're superior. This is a pretty popular opinion in YouTube comments. I'm definitely guilty of this, and a lot of you are too. I'm sure the people from our earlier poll who voted themselves fortunate have much better attitudes going into ranked matches. They look for and take note of all the good things their teammates do, rather than just the bad. I mean, how many of you go into a match saying, I'm gonna count all the great things that my teammate does this match? You don't. Another way to describe how we manage perception is through heuristics. Heuristics are ways of problem solving that employ a practical method that isn't guaranteed to be optimal, but allow us to arrive at a quicker, simpler solution. A common one we use a lot is the availability heuristic. This is when we use the most relevant or most available information in our minds to judge a situation rather than the full picture. The most relevant information to us is often simpler and easier to think of. We do this all the time when judging a teammate's mistakes over our own. As I mentioned before, when we make a mistake, all factors and excuses are exercised and exhausted. But when our teammate makes a mistake, we often just say, why didn't he just go for the ball? Or why didn't he just hit that? That was so easy. This is also referred to as attribute substitution, which is when we convert complex and difficult questions into related yet simpler ones. All right, whoa, that was a lot of info, so let's summarize. Your teammates aren't as bad as you think, or at least you're not as good as you think. The combination of statistics, probability, and psychology all lead to false perceptions and biases that don't really lead to the entire truth. If you really want the truth, just look at your rank. If you're not playing well enough, you will rank up. Your teammates will not hold you back, at least not forever. Just remember that there are people who get to top 100 consistently every season, and they get all the same teammates that you do. Focus on yourself and your own improvement, and you'd be surprised how much quicker you can succeed. Now, hold on. With all that being said, I do still want to acknowledge that there are bad teammates out there, and they do suck. In honor, let's sit back and observe my teammates whiffing in E-flat major. Enjoy.